Hi, I am Dr. Veronica. Welcome back. Now, I want to just begin by saying there are so many incredible topics that you and I could go over, and it's my hope to really hit some of those key topics that really do move you toward personal empowerment. And I absolutely believe that personal empowerment is really tied to personal knowledge. The more knowledge you and I have about ourselves, the more empowered we actually become. So today's topic is kind of a fan favorite of mine, and it really is around building a successful and a strong brand reputation. Now think about that. That's really important. I always said that a brand reputation is kind of your street credit, right? It's kind of a little bit of what people think about you. So it's kind of an intangible but ever present resume, maybe a CV that's always kind of growing and brewing about you based on, it's kind of like a collection of perceptions, beliefs, and opinions that people hold about you. And those typically come from interactions they've had with you, actions you've displayed, behaviors you've demonstrated, choices you've made. All those things matter, and they cause this kind of cumulative perception that people have of us known as a personal brand reputation. Now, you and I probably already know there are companies who go through incredible lengths to secure their brands, right? So they do things like they have warranties. They have money back guarantees. There's certain things you can and can't do with their logo because that reputation, that brand reputation, is critically important to them. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about what it is, let's talk about maybe why I believe it's so incredibly significant. And one of the things I wanted to communicate to you today is it is significant because it reflects your standing. It reflects your standing among your peers, your colleagues, and maybe even to a larger degree, your professional community. So not only do I feel like it reflects your standing, I absolutely believe it influences your standing. It influences your opportunities, career opportunities, relationships, and professional networks. I also believe it has a lot of influence on your personal fulfillment and your perceived value. Now think about that. The more we are known for what we do, valued for our contributions, considered for, our unique traits and capabilities, the more fulfilled we are individually, personally, professionally. And ultimately, the more fulfilled I am, the more satisfied I am, and my concept of self-worth is wonderfully enhanced. So I want you to consider that. Because your brand has a lot to do with your perceived value, has a lot to do with how you feel about what you do, has a lot to do with your performance. How do we know? Because anything that affects how you feel about yourself, your perceived image, identity, perceived importance, or value has a gigantic impact on the way you perform. Think about that. I'm sure you can think of an example, maybe your own personal case study, of a time when you felt incredibly valued, and how that value translated into a greater or higher level of performance. Just as I'm sure you can think of moments where you maybe didn't feel as valued, didn't feel like people understood the value of the importance or the contribution that you brought to the table. And as a result, what happened? You didn't perform at your best. So I think a brand reputation is critically important, right? I think it's important that people know, in a sense, what they can and should expect from us. And I believe a personal brand reputation answers that. It tells people exactly that, what they can and what they should be able to expect from you. So how do we come about this kind of brand reputation, this kind of invisible but ever present resume/CV, this concept that just kind of floats with us that has so much impact on our personal and professional standing? How do we come about such a thing, right? I want you to consider, I think there are probably a multitude of things I could point at, but I prepared, a few for you that I think are incredibly valuable. And one of those is consistency in behavior. This is a big one. I think that this affects our brand maybe more than anything else. The consistency of our behavior. People want to know when they interact with you, whether it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, they're going to find a consistent presence. Consider that. Think about the times you've encountered people and they weren't consistent with you. Think about how off-putting that is. Think about what kind of perception you began to shape around those people and your experience with them. So consistency of behavior is a big one. We want to be trustworthy. We want to behave in a way that demonstrates integrity and honesty. A big one that people don't talk about much that I believe has a huge bearing on your personal brand reputation is your ability to be emotionally consistent. Your ability to be emotionally, not just intelligent, but your ability to be emotionally consistent. Think about that. That's pretty important, right? That we're not going to, find ourselves kind of throwing up everything going on in our personal life, on our professional community, that we're really good at regulating, self-regulating my emotions, self-regulating my feelings in a way that people don't have to be responsible for how I'm feeling, or they don't have to have the aftermath of something that is certainly not anything that they're responsible for. So consistency in your behavior is a critical influencer on the field of brand reputation. Secondly, it's how well you and I deliver on commitments. Now, I think this is, again, I tried to give you a top 5, but listen to this one because every day, all day, we are doing one of two things. We are either making commitments or we're trying to figure out how to manage those commitments. Even if those commitments are not actual and they are perceived commitments or our idea of what is expected of us or what we believe people expect from us. See, these commitments don't have to be actual. They don't have to be delegated things or duties that people give us relative to our job. Sometimes our commitments are perceived. They are not actual, but they are perceived commitments. But nonetheless, whether they are actual or perceived, all day, every day, we are either making commitments or we're figuring out how to deliver on the commitments we've made. Now, so when it comes to being able to deliver on our promises, to be able to follow through on those commitments, those incredibly shape our brand. They not only shape our brand in some ways, this idea of being consistent, as we talked about, but now we're talking about the ability to deliver on those commitments. That's critical. Critical to what? Your ability to be perceived as credible, your ability to be perceived as professional. So this idea of delivering on commitments is huge. And it's one of the ways you and I earn respect from our professional community. It's one of the ways we get invited into new projects. It's one of the ways that you and I move into consideration for things like promotability. So we've talked about things that are shaping this brand, how we got the brand we have, right? Consistency in behavior or the lack thereof, delivering on our commitments, how well do we deliver on those promises? The third one is the quality of work and the contribution you make, right? To delivering the goods, to delivering the results. Now, I want to talk about this one a little bit because I do think the quality of our work is one thing, right? It's what we're expected to do. And I think that people can fulfill those expectations and, we're hired to do a certain thing and we may do those things well. But this contribution actually isn't just regarding a job description. It's just not about kind of, the key objectives and the reason you were hired. This is about how well you play in a meaningful way to a larger context of mission, a larger context of the vision, how well you demonstrate your ability to follow through, all right? Because all of this has to do with your contribution, the valuable role you play in performance or results. So I want you to consider this because I think this is a big one. The quality of your work. Now, quality, again, I'll say you may do great work, but I want you to also consider, can you provide more meaningful work? Can you expand the value and the contribution that you bring to the table every day? I believe you can. But this also shapes in a very large way our brand reputation. The next one, number 4, is communication. Now, how well you and I communicate has a lot to do with our brand reputation. Now, whether this is my ability to communicate respectfully, whether this is my ability to communicate with clarity, maybe this is my ability to communicate with empathy, to be understanding, to be empathetic, to be a great listener, to be a person that can sense and feel and honor the feelings of other people, right? So communication plays a huge role in how you and I are perceived, the sum of that cumulative perception that we keep talking about when it comes to a brand reputation. So let's talk about communication one step further, simply to say this. We understand that communication is roughly 7 to 10% verbal. So I want you to consider how you communicate when you're not talking, how you communicate when there are no words, right? How do you communicate when there is no verbal message? Because that's as much a part of how you and I derive our brand reputation. So I want you to consider how you communicate when you're not talking, right? So sometimes it's in the briskness of our pace, right? That communicates, I don't have time for anything. Don't bother me. I'm in a rush. I have things to do. Or maybe something as simple as you work in an office and your door is never open. Your door is always closed, right? That communicates something incredibly important. Or when you stand in the threshold of a doorway because you're on your way somewhere else, but you're just trying to kind of divvy up your attention and your time. Well, that communicates that I'm in between and I'm not sure I have a moment to really commit to coming in and chatting with you, or whether I'm in too big of a rush to really come in and listen and focus with intention on what you're saying. So communication has a lot to do with our brand reputation. And I would actually have you consider maybe one step further is how well you communicate in writing, how well you communicate in your emails, how well you communicate on the phone. All those things are part of your communicative mastery. And so I want you to think about how these things might be positively influencing or maybe not so positively influencing your desired brand reputation, all right? And then the final one really has to do with character. It has to do with your ethical standards of practice. So, like how much can we depend and rely on you to demonstrate that integrity, that honesty, that diplomacy, that ethical standard of care so that we're doing the right thing, even if no one's checking, no one's watching, like we're always moving in the best representation of our character. And people want to know that we consider them, that our character isn't just about what's best for us. Our character is about what's best for all. So I find that these top 5, whether we're talking about consistency in behavior, whether we're talking about your ability to deliver on your commitments, whether we're talking about the value and the quality of your work and contribution, whether we're talking about your ability to communicate in writing, in person, verbal, nonverbal, or whether we're chatting about your character. All of these things have a heavy ability to influence your brand. So what I want to chat about maybe a little further is I just want to kind of tease apart a couple things. I want you to consider that there's usually an actual brand and there's a desired brand. Can you guess the difference? I'm sure you can. You're brilliant. You're smart. I know you know the difference. So the difference has a lot to do with what you believe to be like your current state, your brand reputation. That's, what you hope, what you desire, what you estimate, what you project is your personal brand reputation. And then there is the actual brand reputation. So I want you to consider that sometimes those aren't the same. Sometimes my brand reputation, the desired brand reputation, is radically different from how people actually engage, interact, right? Or maybe connect with me. So I want you to really think about that, because when I coach people around branding and developing a strong, credible brand, we have to deal with the current brand versus the desired brand. And usually there is a gap between those. because it's easier to presume or assume that the way I perceive myself is the way everybody perceives me. And that's not always true. All right. So I have a little assignment for you, and I want you to kind of pause with me, and I want you to consider these, I'll call them players on the field of your brand, right? We talked about these 5 essential elements that have a huge bearing on your brand, but I want you to assess yourself for a couple minutes. I want you to think about if you're highly consistent in these fields. Are you occasionally consistent? Are you seldom consistent? Or are you inconsistent? Okay, I want you to say it again. So a 4 would be, Veronica, I am highly consistent in my commitments, in the quality of my work and contribution, right? I want you to think about, I'm highly consistent. That's the 4. I'm occasionally consistent. That's the 3. I am seldom consistent. That is the 2. I am inconsistent. That is the 1. I'm going to ask you to just pause here for a few minutes, and let's take a minute and self-assess ourselves against these 5 unique qualifiers for a powerful and strong personal brand. Are you working on that? All right, good. I'm glad you are. Keep working, take your time. I want you to be really honest with yourself. Nobody has to see this. This is just for you. But it's a way to really gauge where you are. One of the greatest assets you will ever have that has a huge bearing on your personal relationships, your professional promotability, your professional movement, all the things you aspire to be and do in this life has a lot to do with your brand reputation, how people perceive you, what they believe they can get from you, what they can expect from you, how they will experience you. And this is way too important for us to be passive about this, or for you and I to leave this to chance. So keep on doing your assessment, and then we're going to move into how do we actually begin to develop a strong, credible brand, a brand that is characterized by 2 things. I want you to have credibility, and I want you to be known to have expertise. I think that's one way we develop a stronger brand. Okay, so by now you probably have some numbers beside those 5 elements. Good for you. Thank you for taking the time to do that. That's for you, right? And it's a great way for you to have a sense of where you are. And if you really, really want to take this to the next level, you invite a peer or a colleague that you really, really trust, that you believe works with you enough to have a sense of how you operate, who has a frequent interaction with you. Ask them to do the same thing, to look at these particular elements and to see whether or not they would give you 4, 3, 2, 1 in any of those columns, right? Because there's your ability to assess yourself, and there's the people who have the beauty of working with you, and their ability to self-assess or assess you was also critically important. So now let's talk a little bit about how in the world do we build a strong brand reputation. I believe the key to that is becoming credible. It's becoming viewed as an expert, right? And everybody wants to be known for their credibility and their expertise. I think that's the first hinge to building a very strong brand. So the first thing I would say is, and you can build your plan of action around those 5 elements, I would encourage that. But I want to give you some how-tos that I believe will support you in growing in your brand and growing and expanding in a brand that you can move through, right? That you can work through. The first one is I want you to think about an area of your profession that you could become a subject matter expert. Where could you become the go-to person? And I know there's a part of this that's like, Veronica, I don't know about this, right? Because sometimes we're the go-to people for so many things that we're trying to figure out how to get things off my plate. This is different. This is an investment in you that will pay dividends for your fulfillment, for your satisfaction, for your career development, for your promotability, for even retention, career retention. So I want you to really think about that. Is there an area that you like to work, that you find passion and interest, and you're like, hey, I would love to become a subject matter expert in this particular area? Or you love studying and creating things, and so you could create really easy processes around unique apps at work, or how to do things in particular that cause people a little bit more angst than you. So I want you to consider that. I know a person pretty intimately that created incredible process maps for an organization. And not only did this move her in terms of how she worked on the team, what she was viewed as incredibly credible as an expert, but she took things that were a little vague and nebulous and she really cleaned the processes for people. And she ended up making kind of an SOP book. Here's operation, standards of operation. And here's how we do these things. And she was able to create some ease and some standardization around how those processes were done by her colleagues. And I think that's a powerful thing. So consider, is there a place in your work that you would think, I could become the go-to person for this, and I wouldn't mind. I would like being the subject matter expert. Why is that important? Because people see you, view you as credible, and they will want and invite your guidance and your expertise. That's important to building a strong brand. Number 2, I want you to consider how you form and write your emails and your reports or anything else that you're on the hook to provide, right? Think about how you do that. Do you take the time to cite something like a reference? Because it proves that what you're putting there is credible. I researched this. I know this data point is factual. It's actual. Here's the site of reference, right? So I want you to consider opening emails with, a beautiful way to engage people, but also here's the so what to my email. Do we spend time in our emails really writing our recommendations, talking through our rationales, so that people know I'm not just willy-nilly. This is not just an opinion. I have an opinion that's baked and steeped in factual, actual statistics or data or things I know from having done my research. So I want you to think about, can you craft your emails and reports in a way that really elevates your credibility, elevates the time you took to put that report together, so you're citing references and things that you learned along the way. Maybe there's a whole back page that's just anecdotal things that are relative to the report that maybe are not in the report. So you just include some things I think were interesting as I worked on this project. That will build credibility. The third one I want you to consider is I want you to demonstrate a track record of delivering high quality results consistently. Now, the only way you're going to be able to do that is you're going to have to actually assess and manage. And I would encourage you to do this weekly, right? So you have to consistently deliver high quality, right? So that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And here's the thing, if you can't deliver it, then you're on the hook to communicate, another piece, to communicate in such a way that people understand it's a win-win. I believe I can have this by because I'd like to have the time to do this real justice. I'd like a day or two to do the research. I have a couple other priorities. How about if I have this to you by, right? So how we communicate in that way really does build credibility. I'm going to spend some time here. It's going to be well worth it. How many days can you give me, right? So I want you to consider, how do you deliver a track record that is impeccable? Now, I believe, I'll say this shameless plug right here for leadership, because unfortunately, most people think leadership is still about position centricity. It's about the role. It's about the job description. It's about how many people report to you. No, it is not about that, right? Leadership, in my estimation, is a self-management strategy long before it's a people engagement strategy. It's it's the way to self-manage. It's a way to optimize and actualize my own performance. So leadership begins at home, right? And it really is a beautiful self-management tool. And I'll talk more about that maybe in another session with you. The fourth thing I want you to consider is, how do you showcase your unique skills, certifications, your abilities, your knowledge? Like, we're kind of the opinion that we don't share that because we believe that's bragging. But how are people going to know what you do if you don't find a way to showcase that and make it a way that's professional, right? So what I would suggest is we can do some really cool things with signature boxes. You can put in your signature box your credentials. You could say, click here to see more of what I do, more of what I'm known for. That's a beautiful thing. Like, the time and the energy and the focus that it took you to gain those professional credentials, you want people to know you have them and to know why that adds to their ability to trust you for a project, engage you in a project, involve you in the result. So I would spend some time figuring out, how do I showcase who I am? How do I showcase what I can do? So maybe it's not just your signature box. You put that at the end of a report you do. You find a way to include it, or maybe there's a place on your emails where people can click here, learn more more about you, like a small little bio of skills. If you need more of this, see me for, right? That'd be such a cool way to just promote a little bit of, here's some skills I have. I'm really good at problem solving. I'm really good at process improvement. And you can find a way to showcase that in a way that people can see who you are and what you can bring to the table. And my final one is really around seeking out opportunities to showcase your expertise. And I'll say most of us are really guilty of waiting for somebody to like tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, you have this beautiful skill. Why don't you do this? But I'm going to say, I want you to take the initiative. I want you to consider like where you can provide a webinar on something you're incredibly knowledgeable about. One of my big things is how much you and I can impact peer onboarding. Is there a role you can play in the onboarding? See, all this builds your reputation. It builds your credibility. It builds your perception of value and known expertise. Is there a role you can play? Can you deliver a lunch and learn to your colleagues? There's just so many beautiful ways that you can contribute by showcasing your unique skills, talents, and abilities. And I think that's pretty powerful. So one of those 5 surely should be a place you can land on, right? So what I want to say as we prepare to close this particular session is I want you to remember that your personal reputation is a powerful asset. And I believe it has so much to do with shaping your professional journey, your personal journey, how fulfilled you are, your economy, how much money you can make. I just believe it's tied to so many incredible things in life. That it's worthy of your attention and it's worthy of your intention. So I want you to take a minute as we close, and I want you to begin to reflect on your current brand reputation. So I had you assess earlier. So based on that assessment and the other things you and I have talked about today, I want you to consider, where your current personal brand reputation is. Maybe you got to get really inflective. You got to get really honest about that. You got to get really honest, because the lack of your honesty only hurts you, right? Secondly, once you reflect on this personal idea, this personal concept of who you are in an intangible presence, who people perceive you to be before they even get to you, the second thing is I want you to identify based on your qualities and your strengths, like what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known for? Think about that. It's a really important question. What do you want to be known for? How do you want people to see you? How do you want to be talked about when you're not in the room? Really important. Thirdly, I want you to identify, and this is the big one area of improvement. I want you to think of one area of improvement that you can focus on to enhance your brand reputation. What's one step you could take today, not tomorrow, right now? I've given you a lot to think about. I've given you a lot to consider. Now I'm asking you to put something into action immediately, right? So I want you to take the action, because a small step today will have significant payoffs for you in your personal and professional world, not just tomorrow, but even today. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. Don't miss next time as we continue in the exact same topic around how in the world do we build a very strong brand. Thank you for your attention and your time today. I'm Dr. Veronica. It's been a pleasure.